that's good. I leave it. All A's and everyone goes home happy. I went into arguing with people over grades and things like that. It's boring. Okay. So I do think this is worth dwelling on because I think the answers are revealing and the questions are, of course, incredibly interesting. Also, you learn a lot about Judaism, or the way Judaism wanted to appear anyway, from reading this and Mendelssohn and others. You get to be quite experts on it. The only marriages expressly forbidden by the law are those with 7 Canaanite nations. I never heard about that. With Ammon, Moab, and the Egyptians. This prohibition is absolute concerning, I didn't know there were 7 Canaanite nations. I guess it's in the Talmud someplace. And with Ammon and Moab, it's limited. See, it's in the Talmud, according to many Talmudists. So these guys are expert Talmudists, obviously, and they know what's in the Talmud, and I'm not an expert on that particular, it's a vast literature, so, you're going to have to spend a lot of time to get an expert on that. Egyptians, the prohibition is limited to the 3rd generation. You really can learn a lot here, you see. There have been at several periods of intermarriage between Jews and Christians in France and Spain and Germany, sometimes tolerated, sometimes not. Unions of this kind are still found in France, but we cannot dissemble that the opinion of the rabbis is against these marriages. According to their doctrine, although the religion of Moses has not forbidden the Jews from intermarrying with a nation not of their religion, yet a marriage according to Talmud requires a religious ceremony of a certain kind called a kiddushin, and it can't be religiously valid, and so on and so forth, without this situation. So they would have to be civilly married, not religiously. So that's okay, you can be a civil marriage. That's what Mendelssohn was saying. We have some religious laws that apply to us, but we're not against civil laws. And if it's not bothering you, it's not bothering us. I don't think they answered that question the way Napoleon wanted it answered. You would agree, right? He thinks there's a little bit of sliding going on here, and yeah, they're doing the best they can, right? They want to be what? They want to be Frenchmen. They want to be French, and they'll do whatever, as much as they have to do to be French. Which all the people coming to America wanted to be American these days. I hope they do. I mean, that's what it used to be. And if people are just coming in here to make money and go home, that really isn't the spirit of America. America was, you came here, you became part of it. And it didn't maybe welcome everyone as well as it ought to, but it didn't stop you from progressing in the way you might want to, in the community that you might want to be part of. I mean, heck, there's been prejudice against the people that I come from the beginning, but I don't care. It doesn't bother me. If someone wants to be prejudiced, let them go be prejudiced. I mean, it just hurts that person. It doesn't really hurt me that much. Can hurt you in social situations and corporations perhaps, and some fraternities or something like that. But if you just get on with your life, there's enough else in this country to do that you can just ignore all that stuff unless you've got a Ku Klux Klan around beating people over the head or scalping people or doing whatever they do.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
On the 2nd paragraph on the answer, there's that it's limited, according to many Talmudists, to the men of those nations, but it does not extend to the women. Does that mean that men from those nations cannot be married to Jewish people, but the women can be married to some Jews?
Read me the paragraph. I'm not finding it.
It's the 2nd paragraph.
Read me the first line.
The prohibition is absolute concerning the 7 Canaanite nations, and then after, according to many Talmudists, it says to the men of those nations, and does not extend to the women. Does that?
You know why? Because in the Bible, even David has a Canaanite mother. Things like that.
So they can marry the Canaanite women.
Well, it's like the old Southern plantation.
Okay.
Like as someone said, they're fudging. They're fudging. I'm not a big enthusiast for rabbinic, Talmudic thought processes, but they're honest here. I mean, that's probably true what they're saying.
So why aren't they honest with usury?
charging into their brother when they're not supposed to, and then, leaving the contract, okay, squash it after 7 or 8 years. And why is it still, why don't they say we're gonna keep the practices of the Bible, and we're not gonna do that? And why do they choose only certain things to uphold while others?
You're asking me? You're stating a point. All right, that's a good point, but I don't have an answer.
Why is the sky blue?
I mean,
Politics.
I never met one who forgave a debt after, what, supposed to be 7 years? Really? Because he knows the Talmudic things better than I do. Look, he's got it all memorized. No, but honestly, this marriage thing, they are sliding a bit here, trying to put the best face on things. But they're saying, look, we don't want to dissemble, we don't want to be dishonest totally, they're saying here. We do have some issues on marriage. And, in a religious marriage, obviously the person would have to convert and I think most religions say the same thing. But we're prepared to have people that go and do civil marriages, that's fine. I don't know if that's a sufficient answer. Now, as far as why aren't they honest, why do they observe some things? I mean, maybe the Talmudists would say you should forgive the debt after the 7th year. That doesn't mean that because the Talmudist says something and anybody did it. I mean, the Talmudist can say whatever he wants, but I don't think anyone that I knew was running around marrying Ammonites, Moabites, and people like that, or Egyptians, the 3rd generation. I mean, that's just something they picked up out of Scripture somewhere. But the practice was, like most ethnic groups, Jews tended to want to marry among themselves, or try to marry among themselves where possible. I think that's a fair statement, and I think you get the same practice among Greeks. Didn't that woman make a movie about Greeks recently? What was it called?
Funny.
What was it? Yeah, I mean, that was the whole point of that movie, right? The problem she was having with her relatives over who she was going to marry, and they were trying to make a Greek out of the guy. And I think the same thing, many Hispanics, many Japanese, many Chinese, many Arabs, tend to try to marry people from the old country, if you want to call it that. But the more assimilated people get, the more, intermarried they become, the less they insist on those things. I'm not saying it's good or bad.
Not even Reform rabbis will do that, really.
Explain what you mean.
Like Reform Judaism rabbis won't marry a Christian to a Jew necessarily.
They want them to undergo some training.
Exactly.
But a priest won't marry a Catholic person to a non-Catholic person without training either. It's just the way these religions are. I don't think a Muslim would be much easier, because all you got to say is, La ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah, and you're a Muslim, so you don't really need a lot of training, and you're ready to go. But don't leave. You try to leave, you're subject to a death penalty. And most people don't know that. You can convert to Islam real easily, but you can't leave. Not to a strict Muslim. So in America you could leave, but if they catch you some other place, they could even try to kill you. So these things get pretty. The Muslims too dissimulate a lot. I'm not being antagonistic to what I'm saying. They don't tell everyone the whole story. They don't say that leaving Islam is punishable by death. They never tell people that. And it is. That's Islamic law. I know Islamic law. I have done Islamic law, strict Islamic law. And it puts the chill, it puts the fear of death into people. Not many people, they can say, that's what they did to Salman Rushdie. You've apostated from Islam because you've laughed at the Prophet. You've made fun about the Prophet, therefore we can kill you. And they have a fatwa to kill him. Because anyone who leaves Islam is subject to the death penalty. If you did something that apostated you from Islam, you're subject to the death penalty. Now, obviously, in England and America, they can't carry it out so easily. But if they can catch you someplace where they can, then the extremists will. So that's why the problem in this situation is that the moderate people get intimidated by the extremists. In a society where people can kill you for your beliefs, you haven't emerged from the Middle Ages. You know, you're not in. What's your point? I'm going to take it quick because I know you have a lot of questions.
I just had a question about where in the Quran that would be, or is it more of a tradition that's being carried on?
I think you'll find intimations of it in the Quran. Whether it's stated absolutely in the Quran, I can't remember specifically that, but it's in the law. It's not into the tradition. It's what's called Sharia law. It's part of Sharia law also. Apostasy from Islam, and it's in the history, all through the history. That doesn't mean they go and do it every minute, but they can use it as a punishment upon you should you do something that they feel is un-Islamic. They can apply the death penalty to you because you've apostated from Islam, and there is no apostasy from Islam. There is no apostasy from Islam. That's why Christian missionaries cannot practice in Muslim countries, not strict ones. And when they try to make Muslim countries accept them and do that, there's a lot of resistance. And in strict Muslim countries, Christian missionaries don't even try because there's a death penalty involved on one side or the other. You can't just go into a Muslim country and start to missionary work. And that's something that's being negotiated. I think even Iraq at the moment, to get the government to modernize some of these things that Christians can be, with the situation in Iraq and almost total collapse, nothing is going to be achieved there on those things. Okay, I see you liked all this kind of thing about marriage, so you read that yourself, okay? In the eyes of Jews, are Frenchmen considered brethren, or are they strangers? Oh, that's an easy one. In the eyes of Jews, Frenchmen are their brothers, and are not strangers. The true spirit of the law of Moses consonant to this mode of considering Frenchmen. When the Israel, now they give some long, historical answer to it. We are bound, says the Talmudist, to love our brethren, all those who observe the Noachic laws, and so on and so forth. Now they give the Noachic laws, which there's a lot of Noachic Christians running around this country now who want to be called the sons of Noah, because according to, and here they give you the actual strict rabbinic, it's very, very good little handbook of rabbinic thinking here. Here the rabbinic laws apply to the sons of Noah, because Noah was considered. I was telling my wife the other day. She asked me, "Well, what's this Noachic? What's Noah?" I said, "Noah is the first man." Well, what do you mean? No, all mankind was wiped away except Noah. So Noah is the father of all mankind. So therefore, you see, there are 7 Noachide laws, but the main one are to abstain from idolatry, blasphemy, fornication, not to kill or hurt our neighbors. It gives all the Noachide laws there, and these are applicable to all mankind. Mendelssohn would say these are the laws of reason. That reason teaches us. We can learn these through reason, but we have it in religion. We don't have to bother looking for it in reason because religion already told us these things. It's very interesting here, the Noachic laws that they set out for you that are applied to all mankind. So Frenchmen are come under that. Sure, we love Frenchmen. Frenchmen are our brothers. Are we? I would say, are we the brothers of Frenchmen? I think they could have been turned around, but they were looking to be accepted, not to cause problems, make waves. In either case, what line of conduct does the law prescribe towards Frenchmen? The line of conduct prescribed towards Frenchmen, very positive. None of our religion is the same as prescribed between Jews themselves. We admit no difference. We all worship the supreme being. Okay.
Their answers are pretty good.
Oh, I think their answers are great. I do think their answers are good.
They do the job well.
I'm glad you acknowledge that point. I think they do a great job. And they thought carefully, and that shows people were not dumb back then. They're very, we always think, oh, people who lived before us are all stupid. No, they weren't. They're actually very sophisticated, sometimes much more than we are.
Well, they didn't have video games.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Most of us couldn't write down responses like this. most of us couldn't write down responses as high-minded and as, effective and intelligent as this. Even if they are a bit slippery. So, at the end of that, I love how they put the end of that. At the present time, when the Jews no longer form a separate people, but enjoy the advantage of being incorporated with the great nation, that is French, which privilege they consider a kind of political redemption, it's impossible that a Jew should treat a Frenchman not of his religion in any other manner than he would treat one of his Israelite brothers. We are so honored to be considered Frenchmen. This Frenchman thing must have gotten really big around this time, It's hard to believe how important, Citizen, citoyen. Sixth question, do Jews born in France, treated by the laws of French citizens, consider France their country? Or are they bound to defend it? Are they bound to obey its laws? Men who have adopted a country, who resided in it in these many generations, who even in the restraint of particular laws which abridged their civil rights were so attached to it they preferred being debarred from the advantages common to all other citizens rather than leave it, cannot but consider themselves as, yeah, you're right, these answers are very good. Cannot but consider themselves as Frenchmen in France, and they consider as equally sacred and honorable the duty of defending their country. Well, that's said in no uncertain words. Jeremiah, so they then quote some religious precedent, exhorted the Jews to consider Babylon their country and remain, and so on and so forth. So he gives them historical material. Finally, love of country is in the heart of Jews, so natural, so powerful, so consonant to their religious beliefs that a French Jew considers himself in England as among strangers, although he may be among Jews. And in the case is the same with English Jews in France. To such a pitch is this sentiment carried among them that during the last war, French Jews have been fighting desperately against other Jews, the subject of countries then at war with France. Many of them are covered with honorable wounds. Others have obtained the field of honor the noble rewards of bravery. So Jews fought in Napoleon's armies. And they're saying that. Who named the rabbis? Since the revolution, the majority chiefs of families names the rabbis, wherever there is sufficient number of Jews to maintain them. What police jurisdiction do the rabbis exercise? Rabbis exercise no police jurisdiction among Jews at all.
And these must obviously be kind of authoritarian questions, like the French want to know who's going to have authority.
Yeah, sure. They want to know who's, where, right. Does the rabbis have any competitive authority or not? And then they go on and look at them. They go on about the history of rabbis. Qualification of rabbi is nowhere to be found in the law of Moses. Doesn't even exist. It's a new thing that has to do with Talmudic law and has something to do with the law of Moses. Didn't exist in the first temple. Only starts to become very great historical insight. That's why I urge you, I can't read everything myself, but I urge you to read it. I mean, you'll learn a lot about Judaism here, like he said. Very impressive. It's only in the Mishnah and the Talmud and a little bit in the New Testament that the word rabbi is found for the first time applied to a doctor of the law. When the Israelites were totally dispersed, they formed small communities where they were allowed to settle. Sometimes in such circumstances, a rabbi and some other learned people formed a tribunal called a Beit Din. That is a house of justice. The rabbi fulfilled the function of judge and others too as his assessors. Since the revolution, these rabbinical tribunals are totally suppressed in France and in Italy, because the French have taken over Italy. And so on. That's really good history here. In a place where there are no rabbis, the Jews who is best instructed in religion may, that's why I like documents, I think they're really good, may, according to law, impart the marriage benediction without the assistance of a rabbi. So that eighth question gives you the whole history of rabbis among Jews. By the way, you guys that took my ethnic diversity class, I hope these subjects interest you. I mean, these are different from that course, and much more specialized. I hope we didn't drag you into an area that you feel a little bit out of interest spectrum. So this is adequate for you guys to understand. Okay, in places where there are no rabbis, we already did that. Ninth question. Anyway, the answer to this one Are there forms of election, police, judicial jurisdiction regulated by law, or only sanctioned by customs? And they say there's only custom does anything in this area. There's nothing in the law about this. What about usury? A question that was interesting, worrying some of you guys. Deuteronomy says, thou shalt not lend interest to your brother. That's what you were worried about. So here's the answer. I mean, let's see what they say. The word neshek has been improperly translated. Oh, we're getting a very pilpoolish answer here, right? Very getting down to definitions of words here. In the Hebrew, it means interest of any kind, not usurious interest. So you see, usury they're saying is different from interest. And they give you a whole spiel here, right? So I think your question is being answered here. What do you, since you're the one who was interested in the subject, what do you think of their answer here?
I think they're kind of dividing it to their own
Interest.
interest.
Of course, they're doing
They're
everything.
trying to back themselves up, and they're like
Absolutely.
evading the honest truth.
And there you said, by the sabbatic year, all debtors were released from their obligations. The year of Jubilee brought with it the restitution of all estates sold or mortgaged. So you have it there. So what's there? So what? How do they get around that one? Is it clear here from this answer how they get around that one? That's in the 5th or 6th paragraph there. The first thought, the end of that paragraph, the first thought. They said the sabbatic. So they cover your point. So I think they're talking about different forms of usury is one thing, interest is another thing, and they had a long answer here. The prohibition of Moses, here's the conclusion, must therefore be considered only a principle of charity and not a commercial regulation. Okay? I don't know how they got here. This is the few Jews in the room know this word who are familiar with the rabbinic activity. It's called pilpul. It's characterized as discussions in rabbinic academies. It literally means pepper. And it's like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, finding the way out of an argument by finding the, pilpul to get out of the argument in the best way you can, really, through back and forth argumentation. And this is a pilpul-esque type argument here, I think. I don't know how they came up with it. And probably it works. They wouldn't have used it if it didn't work. So very, very well, and I urge you to read it. I don't think we need to know it perfectly, but it is, you were interested in the subject. So the word usury can no longer express the meaning of the Hebrew text. So the Bible of this other fellow's translation, Osterwald, and that of the Portuguese Jews call interest that which Sayce, another translator from the Vulgate, call usury. So they're really getting into word definitions here. If the remnants of the people now scattered among the nations, last paragraph of that section, are attentively considered, it will be seen that since the Jews have been driven from Palestine, they no longer have a common country. They no longer have had to maintain among them the primeval equality of property. So I guess they're kind of saying they don't have to follow those laws with fellow Jews since they've been driven out of Palestine. I guess maybe
If that was the final argument, then...
Of that particular question.
Right, then now that Jews have their own country back, do they...
They have a civil code, they have a civil code, they've gone all the way, I never met anyone who forgave any debts anyway, so, I mean, maybe someone did in the old days in the ghetto, maybe the rabbi put pressure on people to do it, but I'm sure in Israel, there's civil law. It's the law of the Ottoman Empire, I told you. It's the Ottoman Civil Code that's been updated somewhat into Israel modern law, but it's French Civil Code law. The Ottoman Civil Code was based on the French Civil Code. And they took all these areas out from under the religious authority. Does it forbid or does it allow usury from strangers? That was about fellow Jews. So we've already basically answered it in the foregoing question, you see. At this point of view, it's equally condemned by the law of Moses and by the Talmud. We're generally forbidden, always on the score of charity, to lend upon interest to our fellow citizens of any persuasion. So when it's a matter of charity, again, you have to read that. I really don't have the time or the inclination or the patience to read all this, but it really is a lesson in itself to read these answers. So, okay, so there is our answer of the Jews of France, and we assume that they are, on this basis, supposedly being brought into French society. Now, a new situation occurs, which is covered in both Rudowski and in this book of excerpts that we have. That is the birth of Reformed Judaism. And you can actually pinpoint the moment of the birth of Reformed Judaism. Now you say, what's Reformed Judaism? Oh, it's hard to say what most Jews are today. But basically, most people think Jews divide out into three categories: Orthodox, Conservative, and Reformed. Although the lines between them get often blurred more or less, depending on where you live and so on. But Orthodox today, not everyone was Orthodox back then who was Jewish. There was no such thing as Reformed Judaism at this point. Those people giving the answers to the French deputies, they are Orthodox Jews who know their Talmud very well, right? And know their Jewish history very well. Reformed Judaism comes next. And it is an outgrowth, to some extent, of Mendelssohn. He didn't countenance it, but the people who followed him took the next steps to reform the Jewish religion in some way, to make it look more Christian, or make the practice of it look more like the way Christianity was practiced, so it wouldn't look or seem peculiar, so Jews could be good citizens without standing out, as it were. In the end, we're going to see things like pews, mixed prayer, men and women, not using prayer shawls, an actual choir, a cantor, a singer. A cantor, a singer is basically a German Yiddish word. Someone who's going to sing operatically the prayers, where Orthodox Jews used to basically sing it themselves. Orthodox Jews tended to pray at their own rate, not in unison so much. And so they sort of are going to look more like Christians across the board, but we're going to see where it happens. And then the reaction to this, not to Orthodoxy, but to Reformed Judaism, is Conservative Judaism. What happens, as we'll see, Rudowski is really best in those areas, and if you read the chapters by him on that score, you'll get the whole historical background of it, good or better than I can even give it to you. And then with our documents here, we fill in the pieces of it. But the conservatives are going to say, as they develop in the Reformed Judaism, will begin around 1810 in Sisson's, Germany, which is about 25 years after Mendelssohn. Will actually begin at a place in Germany. And then the conservatives are already reacting to it. They're saying you're going too fast, in effect. You're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You have to find out which elements are really intrinsic elements to the Jewish religion, and which are elements, somewhat like Mendelssohn would have said, which are temporal, which would not destroy the culture and the religion by being changed or updated or, altered in some way. And the conservatives then are going to say you need an historical approach. To do this, you must carefully study history, So they're very interested in history, and you must carefully study history and see how these institutions or customs or ways of practice developed, so that you can have a proper basis on which to make a decision if they're intrinsic or superfluous or unintrinsic is a better word. So it was something I did want to, let's see, where was I here? There was something I did want to say about I never find my way around these things. Let's see. I think as far as Mendelssohn's children went, and some of Mendelssohn's heirs and disciples, Rudowski gives you a lot of these people and their names. For instance, he mentioned someone called Naphtali Hertz Vesely, 1725 to 1805, a poet, an observant Jew at the same time, learned secular subjects, and was a follower, let us say, of Mendelssohn. Someone else called David Friedlander, also a follower of Mendelssohn. Like in 1788, he founded the Free School in which German replaced Yiddish as the language. But in the next generation, there was more and more conversion. And this wasn't Mendelssohn's goal, 1780s to 1830s. For instance, I think you'll find the example in Rudowski, Dorothea, 1763 to 1839. Mendelssohn's daughter deserted her husband and eloped with her lover, a fairly well-known German poet, Friedrich von Schlegel. And she became Catholic, and 3 others converted. And by, I guess I don't know how many children he had, but I assume he had 5 or 6. Only 2 did not. And within a century, all had converted. So I think that really tells you, even in Mendelssohn's own situation and time, his ideas were not sufficient to solve or bridge this issue. I don't think it was his intention that his descendants should convert. I don't think that was his intention. Again, I would read the material in Rudowski on this. This Friedlander, 1765 to 1834, even offered, by the time he was finished, to be baptized. And the Lutheran pastor, a fellow named, I think his name was Teller, laughed at him, and so on, for even, proposing this, because he wanted to make qualifications that they wouldn't follow the Trinity or the divinity of Jesus, as these were against reason and so on. So he tried to remain a Mendelssohnian, but he really, he was not able to effect it. For instance, he thought in terms of deleting references from Zion to Zion from the prayer book. This would be around 1812. Well, it was left to this individual, who we have here in our in our textbook here, Israel Jacobson. Now, we have a passage here on page 45. I think you'll find it here, after the tortured drifting material, on Israel Jacobson. The date 1768 to 1828. So, well, the dates just show how time is moving. When did Mendelssohn die? In the 1780s, right? So these people are living 30, 40, 50 years after him. They were alive in his lifetime, but they're moving, forward after that, and things are changing very rapidly.
What time relation did Maimon have to Jacobson?
Who?
Solomon Maimon?
Solomon Maimon is probably. Well, let me see. We have some date for him, don't we?
I was looking, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah. Well, Solomon Maimon. I think we have here. Well, he's publishing in 1792, and we don't seem to have a. Does Rudowski give in his index? Does he have an index, Rudowski?
Yeah, but I'm not finding Maimon.
No, it's
M-A-I-M-O-N?
Yeah, M-A-I-M-O-N? No. Well, I think Solomon Maimon is probably a contemporary of Jacobson, maybe a little bit older than he is. I would think that this 1792 is sort of towards the end of his life. He's probably more the age of Mendelssohn, a little younger. I would think he's about, he goes to meet Mendelssohn. I think he would sound to me about 10 or 15 years younger than Mendelssohn. But he's sort of in between Mendelssohn and Jacobson. That's where I would put him.
I asked that because it seems like,
But you could Google him up in a minute. You got to Google, here, you got your thing, it's not plugged in, okay. You don't have a line, huh?
She's on.
Wireless.
Huh, she's not wired?
She is weird.
Wireless.
Yeah?
It's not working right now.
Okay. Well, you could Google it in a second and you could find him, just put in Solomon Maimon and you'd get it. Wikipedia would give it to you. Wikipedia would give it to you in a second. Solomon Maimon would be important enough to make Wikipedia, actually. So. Even I'm in Wikipedia, so. Which surprised the hell out of me.
You put it in there yourself.
No, actually, they say nice things about me. I was really impressed by myself. Someone wrote about me in a sympathetic way. I really, cheapers. They could have been nasty. They were nice. So.
Is it accurate?
I thought it was pretty accurate. Yeah. About as accurate as you can get. I was really surprised, yeah. I didn't write it, I'll tell you that. No one called me up or asked me anything. Okay, Israel Jacobson, he'd be a philanthropist, and he started getting interested in 1768 to 1828. He first founded his school in 1801. That would be around the time, just after Solomon Maimon was probably finishing up. So he, at a school, at a place called Zionism. My book's falling apart, so I hate to leave it. But, okay, I'll just get to it quickly. Zionism. Is it Ian or Owen?
Ian,
Yeah, well. This is in Westphalia, wherever that is. Somewhere in the middle of Germany, I think. So I guess Napoleon had taken some of these areas over, and Jacobson was involved in the school system there in some ways. So as your introduction tells you, he was the first person to build a temple. Yeah, this guy took it all on himself. He did all this himself. You know, I think it's horrifying, frankly, what he did. But this is what happens when new ideas go, I think, rampant. Because who is he? I don't like to say he's a nobody. I've been called a nobody apparently online, so I don't want to call other people a nobody. But who is he? Why can he take it upon himself to do it? I guess
He's rich.
He's rich. And he built the temple with his own funds and placed an organ in the Protestant Christian manner inside. He had a modern service. He had a festival of the Jewish Reformation in which he dedicated the temple on July 17th, 1810. And it included a German sermon, a choir, congregations singing in German, group prayers in unison. And he wore a Protestant clerical garb. Well, there it all is. It's right there. That's Reformed Judaism, just almost bang, born in a minute. I mean, that's almost still doing that in Reformed Judaism today everywhere. I mean, it's almost exactly the same. It hasn't changed an iota. And this one individual in Germany did it all right there in almost one go. So he so we have not long afterwards an actual Reformed prayer book is developed, edited and written by other West German Jews, mostly for use in the Hamburg temple, which is now being repeated throughout large parts of Germany. So let's start with that issue here. I'm going to look at Israel Jacobson's address in a moment. Oh my gosh, coming to. Well, I'll keep you a bit, 10 minutes longer than I usually do. Wait to make up for the waste of time that I did earlier. I think we have to keep moving. Why, first of all, would they call it a temple? What does that mean? What is that saying?
Rebirth?
I don't think so. I mean, I know my answer, so I'm asking a rhetorical question. But the answer which I'm seeking, you may be right in your answer, but the answer which I'm looking for is what? The implication is that we are no longer going to consider that the Jerusalem temple is central to our religion. There were previously synagogues were like, well, it actually is a Greek word. I think Sino means getting together, assembling, and Gog has to do with teaching in some way, I think, or study. So a study center or a teaching center, but it was not ever called a temple. Throughout the whole 1,800 years of Jewish history prior to this, maybe 2,000 years going back before the fall of the temple. Paul goes around the synagogue while the temple is still standing, so there are synagogues even before the fall of the temple. Where was the temple for Judaism? In Jerusalem. Now, there was a northern temple in the Old Testament, which the prophets criticized. Where was that? You've done Old Testament. It was, if you've ever read Amos, Amos is in the northern temple at a place called Bethel, which literally means house of God. It's the southern part of the northern kingdom. Beth is house of, El is God. And they say in Amos, "Go home, prophet, we don't want you in the royal temple of the north. You're a southerner, you belong in the south. Prophesy in the south, get out of our temples, we don't want you here." So there's a northern temple in Bethel. But when the north was destroyed and the south flourished, and there was only one tribe as such really left, except for the Levites and the priestly groups, that was the tribe of Judah, which the south represented. So then all of those left were no longer Israelites, which is why probably it's odd to call the country Israel today. They were Judahites or Judeans, which is where the word Jew comes from, which I explained to you earlier in the class. So the southern temple was the only temple that remained, and that was at Jerusalem. So the Davidic southern temple was for Judeans and their descendants, Jews, the only recognized temple. I told you the issue of the temple was going to get more and more center stage as time goes on. I think in 1967, the Israelis didn't understand, it was a socialist government, they didn't understand the symbol of things. They were more living in a world of left-wing ideology and didn't really understand the trappings that we're talking about here of tradition and the effect tradition has on people. And just the other day, a fellow went up on the Temple Mount and said that we have to stop the ban, one of the extreme right-wing parties wants to be in the government, we have to stop the ban of Jews on the temple. What's the ban of Jews on the Temple Mount in present-day Israel? Not just because the Muslims have it, but the rabbinic ban was what? They were afraid, I think this is ridiculous, they were, again, some hoople, they were sort of, the reason given was that they might inadvertently step on the Holy of Holies, therefore they shouldn't go on the Temple Mount. They were forbidden. Well, how are they ever going to find the Holy of Holies if they don't go up and look for it so they won't step on it? I mean, it's such a ludicrous rationale that it just boggles the mind. But it worked. It's worked until the present day. Anyway, this extreme religious group was saying, no, we mustn't do this anymore. We must allow Jews to go on the Temple Mount, and the implication was that they want to start, changing the situation drastically. And I think there's a lot of right-wing thinking in that regard, as well as evangelical thinking in that regard. And I think that these issues are going to come more and more center stage in your lifetimes. I don't know what the outcome will be. To my mind, I quoted Shakespeare last time, there's a time when taken as flood leads on to fortune. To my mind, they missed the time because they didn't have an ideologically highly formed groundwork in these areas, so they didn't know what to do when the temple miraculously fell into their hands. So they just gave it back to the Muslims, which was kind of them to do, but it isn't something very well thought out to have done. In any event, here the temple is wherever we are. And that's why when you go into a Reformed congregation, have you ever gone into a Reformed synagogue? No, you haven't, because it doesn't exist. You've only gone into Reformed temples. Maybe you would call it a synagogue. But they don't call it a synagogue, do they? No, they don't ever call it. Temple this, temple that, temple this. It's always a temple. Reformed Jews, the temple is where we are. So they are implying by that we do not recognize the temple in Jerusalem as the temple, that our temple is wherever we are. We are not returning to Zion. We are going to be good Germans. We are going to be good Frenchmen. We are going to be good Englishmen, Americans, and so on. So hand in hand with that will be the deletion of the prayer for the return to Zion from the prayer books. See, this is what is implied in the answers to the French questions, and this is what you say, well, what's going on here? These are huge changes in Jewish practice, which are happening overnight. When German Jews came to America in the mid-1800s, after the revolution, we probably don't know the history of Europe that well, but there was a revolution of 1848 that things got very uncertain in Europe. A lot of new revolutionary movements, socialism and so on. A lot of upset in Europe, and the revolutions that swept Europe in 1848. It's a famous period. Karl Marx is rising in this period, either observing or even provoking some of these things, others like him. It's a very unsettled period socially speaking in Europe in the mid-1800s. At that point, immigration to America among Jews, skyrocketed. And when the Jews came, they were coming now from countries like Germany. And everyone in America knew when you saw a German Jew, you were seeing a Reformed Jew. I mean, like, let's face it, my mother is a German Jew. She really isn't. She's on the border of France and Germany. And my father is an Eastern European Jewish person. And, he would have been brought up in what they call a heder, a one-room schoolhouse. He would have learned Talmud when he was young and so on and so forth. But when he came to America, he was born in America, but his brothers weren't. So he would love to throw off all this and become, an American, a modern person. And my mother represented a tremendous triumph for him. But they would be totally assimilated, totally Reformed Jews, and for them, there were no German Jews who in America who came from Germany who even thought, at least that I'm familiar with in terms of Orthodox Judaism, it just was beyond the pale. So Reformed Judaism was something that you automatically blamed on German Jews. They got in Israel, German Jews have a terrible reputation. I told you they have a nickname for them. They call them Yekes, Y-E-K-E-S, because many Israel people come from more Eastern Europe, and they have an animus against German Jews. They think they're all little sort of Prussian Nazi type people. It's a stupid preconception or image that they have, and they think they're all punctual, looking at time clocks and all that sort of thing. They have this ridiculous view of German Jews, but German Jews got a reputation from what we're seeing here in front of us now. That's where the Reformed Jewish movement took off, got started, and took hold. So let's look here at Israel Jacobson's dedication ceremony and his dedication address on page 47. At this season, which is obviously in somewhere in the middle of northwestern Germany, many people came. He was bringing not only Jews but non-Jews together in this building. And on the 17th of July, there was a big festivities. And of course, Jacobson was well off, was an industrial sort of successful businessman. And there were distinguished persons, scholars, Protestant, Jewish, Catholic clergymen, officials, businessmen, and so on. And the ringing of bells began at 9 o'clock, announced the ceremonies would begin. So it's all very German. And the President Jacobson appeared before the audience, and they had a procession into the temple. And after the procession entered the temple, they had this music from Meister singers. He must have had quite a lot of money to put this big thing on, and this what they call the Jacobson Institute. And the Jewish ritual, so-called, began. And at the end, he gave an address. And the scrolls of the Torah, which were ornamented, you go into a Reformed temple, synagogue, whatever you want to call it to this day, they're all ornamented with all sort of fancy silver things. They have a plate over them. They usually have 4 or 5, what they call the ark. In the old days, maybe some of the less modern ones now, because they're trying to get a little more conservative, don't do it, but they would press a button. I'm not talking in Germany then, but now, and the thing would open through electric current. There would be light in there. There'd be 4 or 5 Torahs in there, and then the rabbi would make a big deal of going and taking one of the Torahs out, and so on and so forth. This is all new. All came from here. They were taken from the ark with great ceremony and carried around the temple 7 times. Then there was a chorus, an organ, a full orchestra, and the songs were sang first in Hebrew, then in Germany, and then in German, and everything was all very richly ornamented and decorated. Here's his dedication address. It's been left to the tolerance of our days, Israel Jacobson addressing the audience, to bring about and to make possible that which only a little while ago would have appeared impossible. In building this edifice, it has not been my intent to bring about a complete religious unification of all religions. I'm not trying to unify them. One accomplishes nothing at all if one desires everything too much at one time. Maybe that's my final goal. What is needed is gradual, slow development, as is demonstrated by nature, natural religion, like Mendelssohn. This is someone who's already read his Mendelssohn a little bit. Itself, when it brings forth its greater spiritual and physical accomplishments, you see, he is addressing nature here and imploring nature, if you like. Any divergence from this wise procedure of our common mother nature, see, these are the laws of nature, if you like, what I'm doing here, which human stubbornness or frivolity might suggest, human stubbornness, Orthodox Judaism. That's beneath the words, you see, you can read that. What I had in mind when I first thought about building this temple was your religious education, my Israelite brothers, your customs, your worship. You know, I didn't have any secret intention. I still follow the faith of my fathers. I'm skipping it. But I was looking for some rapprochement, too, with our Christian neighbors. And I want your help, too, in this, the Christians in the room. For your true and progressive enlightenment depends upon this rapprochement. So for our people, we have to be enlightened, follow the world of enlightenment, and we have to get this rapprochement, and this is what this temple is all about. Let us be honest, speaking to Jews, my brothers, our ritual is still weighted down with religious customs which must be rightfully offensive to reason. There's the inheritance from Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn, there's nothing offensive to reason in the customs, but he's saying, let's stop fooling ourselves. There are things in the customs that are offensive to reason, as well as to our Christian friends. So we've got to change under these pressures. You know, it desecrates the holiness of our religion and dishonors the reason. Everything is reason, 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 reason. The reasonable man to place too great a value upon such customs. These customs, you know, can be thrown out. On the other hand, he is greatly honored. I'll just get to the end of this speech and we'll go, okay? If he can be increasingly encourage himself and his friends to realize their indispensability. Our ecclesiastical office, the Israelite Consistory, it is willing to help us. And you, my highly honored other friends who in name and in some aspects are different from my faith, I hope I have full agreement in your sympathetic heart. So he's pandering to everyone in the audience. And then he addresses himself to God. O thou, O God, whose mighty hand has lifted up our people once again. O thou, O God, whose goodness has made it possible to complete the work of several years. Give us thy love, thy benevolence, and so on and so forth. And with this confidence, let us not be guilty of indolence, of delay, of the embarrassment of indecisiveness, of the mystical hope of the superstitious, and merely hope for your assistance. What's the mystical hope of the superstitious imply? Oh, this mystical idea of a temple in Jerusalem, of a return to Zion, all these superstitious ideas that are never going to happen. We're living in Germany, we're here in Germany, we're citizens, this is what we need to do. And then, look, always apply, appealing to reason. Thou is gifted with reason and freedom, that a man, that he might think for himself, act for himself. Let us never despair the cause of religion and mankind. Let us not lose heart when we find that any beginning like the uplifting and enlightenment of a dispersed people can proceed but slowly. Above all, O God, make us vividly conscious that we are brothers with all adherents and other divine teachings, that we are descendants of one humanity, which adores thee as the common Father, that we are brothers that must learn love and gentle tolerance, brothers finally under thy guidance, walk toward a common goal, and who in the end, when the mist will have been dispelled before our eyes, and all the errors gone from our spirit, and all doubts removed from our reason, will meet each other on one and the same road. Yeah, the road to Auschwitz. This is only in retrospect. And all these fine ideas are really lovely, except in the light of actual history, and see what really happened. We'll pick up there next time. I know you want to go, I apologize. I just wanted to get that one line in there. You guys read this for yourselves, huh? Keep up with me. We'll have one more class like this, and then we'll have a little writing the next class after. Pardon me for saying that. That's what.
No bush beating there.
No, Bush is not going to send anyone out.